This is Angel Connect podcast show, episode number 9, an interview with James Comeaux by Hall Martin. In this episode, Hall Martin interviews James Comeaux, who happens to be an investor in not only the technology field, but also in the consumer area and sports environment. He is an entrepreneur as well as an investor, and what he discusses is the importance of the execution of the strategy, not just the product and not just the idea. In this episode, they spend a lot of time discussing the legal issue. The focus is on the contract or the deal negotiations, how to make them more efficient, and how to make them more effective. And this means using simplicity, but having the essential deal details given. Now, Jim discusses and describes some of the examples that he's been through and what he would suggest. He also gives different suggestions on the legal information and how to handle it. So here's a discussion that took place remotely over the line by Hall Martin interviewing James Comeaux, entrepreneur and angel investor. Let's listen in.
Well, this is Hall Martin with Angel Connect. We're here with Jim Comeaux. And Jim, thank you for being with us here today. I'd like to talk, first of all, about what do you like to invest in as an angel investor?
Well, that's a good question. I tend to invest in technology because technology is, pretty much my background. But I have invested recently in a couple of consumer products and looking in the action sports arena as well for other ideas.
What was your most successful investment, and how did it go down?
So I'm both a entrepreneur and investor. So probably my most successful investment was an investment in the one of my startups, which was a business class ISP that we grew from the ground up to, I think we were running about $8 million a year. We sold that company to a VC-based Dallas company back in 2006. And since that time, I've been working on quite a few investments, but nothing real major yet.
And then there's always the investment that didn't work out. Can you give us an example of what didn't work and why did it not work out?
So I made an investment in a call center company that was trying to take advantage of the refi and the debt consolidation marketplace. Let me say I probably did not do the proper due diligence on the overall marketplace for that. The guys that I invested in had the execution skills and the wherewithal to pull off the project, but in the end it was the overall legal side of the marketplace that pretty much closed out that market. So it wasn't a horrible investment, but it wasn't a great investment.
I see. Well, you've had quite a good track record of investing and so forth. What do you like to invest in, and what do you look for?
So for me, the most important thing is how a team, and not necessarily the current team, but the idea behind the execution of the strategy, right? Because, unlike most entrepreneurs in the marketplace, you can say, hey, here's a great idea. And you look at this great idea and you go, yeah, it's a great idea. How do you execute? What's the marketing plan and what's the operational execution of it? And today a lot of what we're looking at are software as a service companies that are part of the big change of the cloud. And, I try to stay away from the word cloud, but I like to use software as a service. And a lot of these guys are capable of building software packages today because dev cycles have shrunk. And quite honestly, most guys can have a software duplicated overseas for very minimal dollars and very quickly. The hard part is that market's become a flood of new software. So there has to be a real solid plan on how you're going to go to market. And then not only how you're going to go to market, what is going to drive people to buy the software, and then the big hurdle that I see in the marketplace today is the actual onboarding and execution post-sale. And I think that's, what I'm looking at today is some of the bigger struggles. I'm looking at a deal right now that is a cloud aggregation company. And, it's all based on, what kind of aggregation platform they can build in the cloud. But again, they've got a great idea. They've got a pretty decent team, but I'm still not seeing a real execution strategy on the back end. And it's holding me up right now from making that investment.
I see. Well, we were talking earlier about papering these deals and closing them out, and you have the message of keeping it simple. And these deals can get quite complicated, especially when the lawyers get involved. They get very complicated. What's your take on these contract negotiations, and how do you approach them?
Well, a lot of times you'll find investors. Entrepreneurs are, unless they're highly seasoned entrepreneurs, and this is their second, third, or fourth deal, then they're getting handed a big pile of paper from their attorneys, and the attorneys are making really good money on these deals. But in the end, I like to see real simple fundraising documents. Send me a 5 to 10 page PowerPoint. Show me everything that I need to see in that. But on your funding docs, keep it simple. Don't send out 13, 14 page documents for a convertible note. Why am I going to, I'll have to send that to my attorney to review. So I'm going to go spend 2 hours with a $400 attorney just to review a funding doc for a $25,000 or $50,000 investment. You're asking a lot. Let's keep it simple. Keep it to 3 to 4 pages. Make sure you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Tell me about the corporation. Tell me, send the cap table along with the funding docs. Make sure that you have it all packaged up so we're not burning a bunch of cycles to get a deal done.
So we often get into legalese. How do you handle legalese, and how do you get that converted to plain English? What's your strategy there?
It's like you and I talked the other day. The last deal I did a handshake deal with the CEO, and I wrote him a check, and that was by far the simplest deal I've done. Now, we've gone back and papered it up and kept it nice and clean and simple, but it's tough. I've got a funding offer sitting in my inbox, and I went to open it up, and it's not a common deal. And it's like you're talking, how do you get a deal that's really complex into a simple format? And it's really tough because, again, some of the entrepreneurs in the marketplace, they've got a mindset going, and they're focused on, they're focused on what they're supposed to be focused on, which is their products or their service, whatever they're trying to deliver, not necessarily, what their attorneys have handed them. So it does get complicated.
Well, lawyers will come in and tell us that they just need to cover all the bases, and that's why the document has to be so large and encompassing and so forth. What's your take on that?
What are the odds in the marketplace of a deal, of an entrepreneurial opportunity becoming, a big deal? They're slim in my book, right? So I think it could be 2 out of 10, maybe 1 out of 10 will bring you a decent return. Maybe 2 out of 10 will get you your money back. So, in the end, I think it's a waste of money on the entrepreneurial side to go spend a whole bunch of money. There's really a bunch of good templates out there in the marketplace today. Just keep it simple. Focus on the execution.
That's great. So going forward, is that a requirement you put on entrepreneurs when they come in the door? We're going to keep this simple, and is that one of your criteria? Is how they handle that, or does that just come up later and you just manage that when that happens?
I think I see everything under the sun. So you and I discussed. I'm looking at purchasing an actual operating entity. So it's a true asset purchase. It's an investment, angel investment, I guess you would call it, but it's a running company, and it's being sold by a broker. And I've just looked at it. The broker sent over a 1 and a quarter page buy-sell agreement. And I'm talking about keeping it simple. It was actually too simple. That one was too simple, right? So you never know what's going to come in the door.
So if it's too simple, how do you find that middle ground? What's the requirements there that it's not too complicated, but it's not too simple? What do you use to measure that it's just a I guess, the Goldilocks version of contracts.
I don't know if there's the holy grail, I guess, or the Goldilocks of a contract, but from that particular situation, I called the broker up and said, I appreciate you sending out this relatively simple document. We're going to return a letter of intent or a letter of interest with deal terms, and then we'll come back if those deal terms are accepted, and after discovery, structure a real buy-sell agreement or offer letter than a buy-sell agreement. That'll, 'cause it was just too simple.
I see. So it's really a negotiation process. You just have to work through it a little bit to make sure it's the right size for the right deal. I mean, these deals come in all different sizes: small dollar, medium, big dollar, and I guess they come with different risks: small, medium, and large. And then the contract just needs to kind of match into that as well.
Right. Most definitely. Yeah, and it really depends on what the person's trying to accomplish, on the backside. If they're trying to raise, true debt, if they really want to sell equity, but I mean most of the stuff we see today is all, it's all convertible notes. It's relatively simple, and I think that keeps it, kind of on par with everything in the marketplace. I don't know, what are you seeing? So
we see quite a range of deals, and so we see quite a range of contracts that come with it. We do see simple convertible notes. We do see more complicated Series A preferred equity rounds. We do see later stage rounds where there's a lot going on the cap table, and so there's a lot more that goes into it. So it really depends upon the stage of the deal, but we
Sure.
see a lot of early stage work where the simpler it is, the better, because the entrepreneur really just doesn't have a lot of funding to put into the legal side of it. And some of the legal docs seem to be maybe overkill for what we're trying to do here, because it's just not that much money or risk on the table at this stage.
Right, and I agree to your point. I have a deal on the table that's a 10-year-old company that's at an inflection point, and they are about to launch a new software, and they've got a new marketing strategy, and they're trying to raise money to launch the new marketing strategy, but they've been private and self-funded to this point, so they are unwilling to release a lot of data that, an investor really, really wants to see to understand what their actual position is going to be on the dollars that they invest. And a lot of times it's hard to get that sophisticated data out of, the unsophisticated entrepreneur set.
Well, going back to the cost of the legal fees, if you had a $100 project on the table, what percent of that should be going to legal fees? Do you have any rules of thumb there?
You don't really want to know my answer on that.
Well, what is it?
I'd like to see zero, right? But that's impossible, right? So I think
right.
I wouldn't put any more than 5% of attorney cost into doing a deal. It really depends on who you are and how much you're investing. But on a $50,000 investment, I'll spend $1,000 on an attorney to review the docs.
Well, it used to be back in the 90s, the venture capitalists were putting out $5 million into a deal, and so there's plenty of room for legal. And then in the 2000s, that $5 million deal turned into a $500,000 deal. And then as we move into the cloud-based world and the crowdfunding world, that $500,000 deal goes down to 50 or 100K. And so, there's downward pressure on the legal costs. Legal costs have to come down, and if you're still doing it old school, pen and pencil and eye shade and so forth, you could still be putting out a very, very expensive legal costed document there. And so the legal industry really hasn't moved down the cost curve like everything else has. Everything else has gotten a lot cheaper to run a business. Sales is cheaper, marketing is cheaper, but legal hasn't really come down yet. And the interesting to see as the pressure mounts on it, how they innovate and get the cost down further to match it. Because if you have a $50,000 deal, you're not going to pay $15,000 for a Series A document. That's a third of the cost. And to get down to your 5%, they need to be doing that 15K Series A doc for around $2,500. And it'd be interesting to see how they can get down there to that.
Yeah, in most of my history, I've dealt with the bigger law firms, the DLA Pipers and so forth. And recently, I've been able to find ex big firm guys who've moved out and started their own firms who have the skill sets. Instead of being an $800 an hour attorney, they're more in the $300 to $400 range, which helps immensely in getting those deals done. Turn times faster, and then you're getting more expertise for that's not tied to what the big firms require, and that's billing on the second, second billing, 6-second billing, like the old telephones.
I see.
Right. So that's been helpful for me.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for your insights on this. Appreciate you spending some time here on Angel Connect today. We look forward to seeing you here soon, and we'll hopefully share this with other investors to see how they can approach the Goldilocks of contracts and get to that great stage where legal costs aren't taking up so much of the transaction fee. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, all. Bye-bye.